They mocked the quiet single dad for being poor. 15 days later he came back as the new chairman. The room went silent when the poor single father walked back into the company wearing the same worn brown shoes they had laughed at 2 weeks earlier, except this time the receptionist stood up, the executives stopped whispering, and the entire board waited for him to take the chairman's seat. 15 days earlier, those same people had watched him carry his daughter's cracked lunchbox through the lobby and had treated him like he did not belong there. Nobody knew that the quiet man they mocked had been carrying a secret far heavier than poverty, a secret that would soon change the future of everyone who had humiliated him. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to our channel. Sometimes a simple act of kindness can reach farther than we ever imagine. His name was Everett Hale, and at 38, he had learned how to make himself almost invisible. He lived in a small rented house at the edge of town with his 9-year-old daughter, Maisie, and spent his mornings preparing her breakfast before walking her to school. Everett had once been an ambitious mechanical engineer, but after his wife, Clara, died from a sudden illness 3 years earlier, everything changed. The grief had been unbearable, and raising a child alone while trying to keep a demanding career had become nearly impossible. Eventually, Everett left his old position and accepted whatever work allowed him to be present for Maisie. He repaired machines, delivered supplies, fixed broken equipment, and sometimes worked several small jobs in the same week. He never complained. If money was short, he simply found a way to stretch it. If Maisie needed new shoes, he went without something himself. His daughter knew they were not wealthy, but she never thought of her father as poor. To her, Everett was the man who could fix anything, who made pancakes shaped like stars, who remembered every school project, and who always held her hand a little tighter whenever she was afraid. One Monday morning, Everett received a phone call that seemed almost too good to be true. Calderon Industries, one of the largest manufacturing companies in the region, had hired him temporarily as a maintenance consultant. The position would last only a few weeks, but the pay was enough to cover overdue bills and finally replace the broken heating system in their house. Everett arrived at the company carrying a faded canvas bag filled with tools and wearing the cleanest shirt he owned. He did not know that the temporary assignment would place him in the middle of a corporate crisis involving a multi-million-dollar production contract. He only knew that he needed the work, and he intended to do it well. From the first day, Everett noticed the difference between the workers on the factory floor and the executives upstairs. The employees greeted him warmly because they understood what it meant to work with their hands. Upstairs, however, several executives looked at him as though he had wandered into the wrong building. The worst among them was Preston Vane, the company's chief operating officer, a polished and ambitious man who wore expensive suits and measured people according to their clothes, titles, and bank accounts. Preston had spent years trying to position himself as the inevitable successor to the aging chairman, Malcolm Reed. He disliked anyone he considered insignificant, and Everett's quiet manner made him an easy target. The humiliation happened on Everett's 5th day. Maisie's school had closed early because of a teachers' conference, and Everett had no one available to watch her. He had asked permission to bring her to the employee cafeteria for less than an hour while he finished an urgent repair. Maisie sat quietly at a corner table with her backpack beside her and the same pink lunchbox she had carried since 2nd grade. She was reading a library book while Everett worked nearby. When Preston entered with several executives, he glanced at the child, then at Everett's worn shoes, and smiled in a way that made the room uncomfortable. He loudly remarked that Calderon Industries was apparently becoming a shelter for people who could not afford childcare. A few people laughed nervously. Everett lowered his eyes and continued working. Maisie looked up at him, confused, but he simply gave her a reassuring smile. Then Preston noticed the cracked lunchbox. He made another cruel remark about how some people carried their entire fortune in plastic containers. This time, laughter spread across the room. Everett could have responded. He could have defended himself. Instead, he quietly closed his toolbox, took Maisie's hand, and walked away. His silence was not weakness. It was restraint. He had promised Clara, long before she died, that he would never allow anger to become the person raising their daughter. That afternoon, Everett discovered something that changed everything. While repairing an automated production line, he noticed that the machine had been deliberately programmed to operate outside its recommended safety limits. It was not an accident. Someone had altered the system. Everett documented the problem and sent a technical report to the company's compliance office. He expected an investigation. Instead, he was called into Preston's office and accused of interfering with management decisions. Preston warned him that temporary workers who caused trouble did not stay temporary for long. Everett quietly explained that the machine could cause a catastrophic failure if left unchanged. Preston dismissed him and ordered him to sign a statement saying the equipment was functioning normally. Everett refused. The next morning, Everett was told his contract had been terminated. He walked out of the building carrying his canvas bag while rainless daylight stretched across the parking lot. He had no idea that someone inside the company had already begun examining the report he left behind. That person was Malcolm Reed, the chairman himself. Malcolm was 71, physically frail but mentally sharp, and he had spent 40 years building Calderon Industries from a small workshop into a national manufacturer. In recent months, however, he had become increasingly concerned about the company's leadership. He suspected someone was manipulating financial records and cutting safety corners to inflate profits. What caught his attention about Everett was not merely the technical report. It was the fact that Everett had refused to sign a false statement even when doing so could have saved his job. Malcolm quietly ordered an independent review. The findings were disturbing. Several safety systems had been intentionally bypassed, maintenance budgets had been diverted, and financial records had been manipulated. The trail led toward Preston and several senior executives. But Malcolm discovered something else about Everett. Years earlier, before Clara became ill, Everett had helped design a revolutionary energy-efficient manufacturing system. The patent had been acquired by a small engineering firm, which had later sold its rights to an investment group. Malcolm realized that the technology now represented one of the most valuable assets connected to Calderon Industries. Everett had never told anyone about it. The reason became clear when Malcolm found the old patent records. Everett had not pursued wealth after Clara's death. He had deliberately transferred most of the proceeds into a trust designed to support his daughter's future and had lived quietly on the remainder. He was not secretly living in luxury. He had simply chosen not to spend money trying to prove that he was successful. The man everyone had judged by his shoes had built something worth more than their opinions. Over the next several days, Malcolm met privately with Everett. He learned about Maisie, Clara, the years of sacrifice, and the reason Everett valued integrity above money. Malcolm also learned that Everett had been developing another manufacturing technology independently, one that could transform Calderon's struggling production division. Instead of immediately offering him a job, Malcolm asked him to help uncover the truth about the company. Everett agreed, but only on one condition: innocent employees would not be punished for the actions of executives. For 10 days, Everett worked quietly with Malcolm and an independent legal team. Evidence accumulated. The corrupted financial records, altered safety systems, and falsified reports all pointed toward Preston. Several executives who had laughed at Everett suddenly became nervous when investigators began asking questions. One by one, they realized that the quiet maintenance worker they had dismissed had become central to the investigation. On the 15th day, the board assembled for an emergency meeting. Preston arrived confident that he would soon be named chairman. Instead, Malcolm entered carrying a folder and announced that the company had uncovered serious misconduct. Preston tried to blame Everett, but the evidence was overwhelming. The board removed Preston and several others from their positions and referred the financial crimes to authorities. Then Malcolm made an announcement nobody expected. He was retiring as chairman. His successor, he said, would be Everett Hale. The board erupted in disbelief. One executive protested that Everett had no corporate title and had only recently been a temporary contractor. Malcolm calmly explained that leadership was not a reward for expensive clothes or impressive speeches. Leadership was the ability to protect people when doing so was costly. It was the courage to tell the truth when lying was easier. It was the willingness to remember the human beings behind every number on a balance sheet. Then Everett walked into the room. He wore the same brown shoes. For a moment, nobody spoke. Everett looked around the table at the people who had once laughed at him. Some lowered their eyes. Others looked ashamed. He could have humiliated them in return. He could have reminded them of every cruel word. Instead, he placed his old canvas bag beside the chairman's chair and said that he did not want to build a company where anyone had to feel ashamed of honest work. His first decision as chairman was not to increase his salary. It was to establish an emergency fund for struggling employees. His second was to restore safety budgets. His third was to create a scholarship program for the children of factory workers. When someone asked why he would help the very people who had mocked him, Everett gave the simplest answer of his life: because being hurt did not give him permission to become cruel. A week later, Maisie visited the company with her father. The same cafeteria where she had once been embarrassed now had a small reading corner created for employees' children. She placed her old cracked lunchbox on the table and proudly showed her father a drawing she had made of him. In the picture, Everett was standing in front of the factory wearing a suit, but she had drawn his old brown shoes underneath. When he asked why, she smiled and explained that those were the shoes that carried him through the hardest days. Everett had to turn away for a moment because his eyes filled with tears. He thought about Clara. He thought about every morning when he had wondered whether he was doing enough for their daughter. He thought about the bills, the rejection, the humiliation, and the days when he had quietly eaten less so Maisie could have more. None of those sacrifices had disappeared. They had simply become part of the road that brought him here. But the greatest victory was not becoming chairman. It was becoming the kind of man who could hold power without allowing power to change his heart. Months later, Calderon Industries was stronger than it had been in years. Employees who once feared management began speaking openly about safety and fairness. The company became known for investing in families and rewarding honest work. Preston's name gradually disappeared from the building, but Everett never erased the memory of what happened. He kept it as a reminder that arrogance could blind people to human worth. One afternoon, Everett stood beside the factory entrance with Maisie holding his hand. Hundreds of employees were leaving work, and among them were people who had once laughed at his shoes. Some nodded respectfully. A few stopped to apologize. Everett accepted every apology without bitterness. He understood that forgiveness did not mean pretending the hurt had never happened. It meant refusing to carry that hurt forever. Maisie looked up at him and asked whether he was happy now. Everett smiled and told her that happiness was not about having the biggest office or the most money. It was about knowing that when life gave you the chance to become powerful, you chose to become kind. If this story touched your heart, please leave a meaningful comment telling us what you would choose if you were in Everett's position: revenge or forgiveness. Share this story with someone who needs hope today, because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the person carrying the greatest strength. And if you believe that kindness can change lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Everett looked down at his old brown shoes one final time and smiled. They had never been symbols of poverty. They were proof of how far he had walked. And somewhere inside that quiet smile was the truth that changed everything. People may judge you by what you have, but your character is revealed by what you choose to do when you finally have the power to hurt the people who once hurt you. Everett had walked into that company as a poor single father carrying a toolbox and a wounded heart. 15 days later, he walked back as chairman. But the title was never the real transformation. The real transformation was that the man who had every reason to become bitter had chosen, instead, to become better.